Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. My name is Mandy Salley. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at the Woodhull Freedom Foundation. And welcome to our very first LinkedIn Live. Apologize in advance if we have any glitches or tech errors. We're learning as we go. And I'm really excited about my conversation today. I am joined by the brilliant Dr. Val Webber, and I'm going to have you introduce yourself in just a second. But folks who are joining us, please feel free if you have questions or comments during our conversation today, please feel free to utilize the question box or the chat box on LinkedIn, and we'll try to get to them. Today, we're going to be talking about some recent research that Dr. Webber completed about NSFW, or not safe for work, for those of you who are not in the know, content on Reddit and their content moderation policies. And we're going to get into all of that in a second. But before we get there, Dr. Webber, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to our audience, tell us a little bit about you and your work.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. It's really exciting to be here. I got so excited I slipped off my chair at the start. My name's Dr. Val Webber, they, them pronouns. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Sexual Health and Gender Research Lab, affectionately known as the SHAG Lab at Dalhousie University in Canada. And my background that got me here is in my Ph.D. research. I really focused on occupational health, actually, in porn production. As that role brought me to be the board chair of PASS, which is Performer Availability Screening Services. It's an occupational health and safety organization for adult film. So I do a lot of work in adult film health and safety, but then I'm also now on the advisory board for Ethical Capital Partners. So many acronyms today, ECP. So many acronyms, I'm sorry. And ECP, you might not know the name, but they recently acquired ALO, which used to be MindGeek, which owns Pornhub. So connected to adult in a few ways. I worked in adult myself as a performer for about 15 years. So I have a lot of personal and professional interest in how not safe for work content and sex workers are treated online. That's a bit of my scope and where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and it's quite the breadth of experience, and so that's why I'm really excited to have you with us today. And this is actually a postponed conversation. We were supposed to do this way back in September for Sexual Freedom Month, so I'm really glad we were able to make this happen today and on a different platform. So exciting stuff. And we're going to be talking about Reddit, which is a entirely different platform today. And so you and your co-author, co-researcher, Ashley Lake, published this report, I believe in August, about Reddit specifically. And it's a lengthy report, and we will definitely link to it so folks can read it themselves. I would encourage you to read it because it's really interesting. But let's kind of give folks an overview, and we'll dive into a few different aspects of the report. But before we get into that, I'd like to know sort of what brought you to doing this research. Why Reddit, why NSFW content? If you could just give us a little bit of a background on what made this report happen.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, for those who it is lengthy, but there's a lot of graphics and pictures. We tried to make it fun. So it's
actually beautiful, I will say.
50 pages, but lots of pictures. Ashley Lake is the co-author on this, and she's actually the one who's really deeply familiar with Reddit. I'm not actually a very strong Reddit user. I've known about it for a long time. I certainly poke around, but I wasn't very familiar with what was going on Reddit, except that it is one of the only social media platforms that allows any kind of not safe for work content. So I knew that some sex workers or other, adult industry workers were using Reddit for advertising and things like that, but I didn't know that things were shifting. So Ashley is someone that I met back in 2021 through Twitter. I volunteered when she was organizing some campaigns against MasterCard when MasterCard passed those new adult content policies. that have really harmed the adult industry as well. And so that work and her campaigning helped inform a different report that I had done about MasterCard. And so Ashley and I kind of got connected through that, and knew each other, through Twitter Spaces. And then it was, I guess, last year that she was hearing more and more from people that they were experiencing more intense moderation of their not safe for work content on Reddit. So people just having more shadow bans or having their accounts flagged more, generally having a harder time existing on Reddit as a not safe for work poster. And of course, like all of these things, it's hard to prove that something's going on, especially if you don't have any kind of data, because platforms are pretty opaque about how they do their content moderation. So as with the MasterCard issue, where we wanted to try and gather some hard data from people and what they were experiencing, we wanted to take the same approach here. So Ashley had reached out on Twitter and just named me and a few other researchers, like, hey, does anyone have any time to look into this? And so we started talking and pulled together some surveys and just started collecting data. And it did take a little while. We did a really large survey and then a smaller survey, and then I got a job, and it got slowed down a couple of times, but
Yeah.
we did finally get it out earlier this summer.
Yeah, and it's out there, and it's important information that I imagine will be referenced quite frequently now that we've got like some hard numbers to look at. And I also want to say that these platforms are changing pretty consistently, right? And changing their policies. And so there's only so much we have access to. So I'm glad that this is out there and that it exists. And I know that Reddit has been controversial lately. Imgur was a platform that a lot of people use to post GIFs to Reddit, and they just totally changed their policy around not safe for work content. So there's constantly changes happening that make anybody posting not safe for work content have trouble, right, navigating all of this. So I want to kind of break down some of the findings here, and we'll kind of go through them one at a time. So, of the respondents surveyed that noticed a change in the moderation, what moderation changes did they notice sort of initially? What made them sort of perk their ears up to maybe something was going on?
So it was the vast majority of respondents had noticed like some kind of uptick in moderation. 83% had some kind of moderation. And the types of moderation that people were noticing the most was really more like shadow banning and sort of general deprioritization, not showing up, or things not getting as much as engagement as they usually did with no clear reason. So, that's always the trickiest type of moderation to pinpoint, because it's the absence of views, but not an outright ban or outright flag or anything like that. At the same time, there were 15% of people who had a profile just fully deleted, just completely annihilated, and had to either repeal or start over. And then 59% had been like suspended or banned by a sub moderator. And I mean, that's, if we get into what makes Reddit kind of a different beast in terms of moderation is, you've got your site-wide terms of service and your Reddit admin who are doing moderation for the site-wide rules that apply everywhere. But then every single community is built and moderated by volunteers, right? And they can make up whatever rules they want. I guess the site-wide rules would always overrule, but it creates a lot of disparity in terms of how each different community is moderated. And we know that moderation is always done in kind of unfair ways too, where some people are disproportionately targeted by the same set of rules. So you've got a lot of different levels of what's going on there. And it does make it tricky to capture what might be happening on a global level. But yeah, so within those sub-moderated communities, there was an uptick in moderation as well. And a lot of people were being suspended or having, again, their accounts banned within that subreddit.
Yeah. Reddit is totally a different sort of beast, I
Even
will
just
say.
glossary of terms, we were like, we need to have a set of terms because there's so many different words. Like, it's a community, it's a subreddit, there's mods, and there's a lot of terminology. It's a big learning curve if you're a bit of a noob like me.
Yeah, well, and me too. And I was sort of under the impression that Reddit was a place that was still sort of a friendlier environment to a lot of sex workers, adult creators, more so than like the meta platforms, right? Like Instagram and Facebook, and so I think part of what was interesting about the research was that folks who had been pushed off these other platforms had sort of gone to Reddit and now were experiencing similar issues. With censorship and all of that stuff. And I also want to say, and this probably should have been the first question I asked you, and I apologize for not asking it sooner, but can you tell us, when you say moderation or content moderation, what do we actually mean by that for folks who are maybe not in the know with the lingo?
Yeah, good point, because I take it for granted now that that's language we're all familiar with because we're, on platforms. But moderation is essentially the different way that content that is posted to a platform is prioritized or not, and the rules around if and how it will appear on the site. And then moderators, or the people undertaking that moderation, can both be employees of the site, which are very often third parties that are hired out in sort of private firms. Or also, of course, users play a role in moderation, even on a site that isn't like Reddit, where they have a lot of control in the moderation. If you want to flag something as inappropriate, or you flag someone as catfishing or things like that, that would also kind of fall within the realm of how moderation works. So it's the rules around what kind of account you can have and what you can do with that account, I guess.
Yeah. I think people are sometimes under the impression that when you're on social media, you're just posting and it's going out there, and it's sort of this like public square. And that's really couldn't be further from the truth.
There's some tools you can go on to that will try and determine if your account is shadow banned in certain ways. Or I've done tests even with, having friends try to search for my account, which I don't even post. I keep my account on Twitter is the only thing I'm really on, or whatever we call it now. But not even posting anything actually explicit, things about sex work, but not actual. I follow a lot of porn performers and look at their stuff, but I'm not like posting titties,
Right.
And
Right.
still I've found myself shadow banned at times. And a lot of people that do research or whatnot in the area will find ourselves shadow banned, where you can't find us, you search. So shadow banning, for people that don't know that term, is if, for example, you want to use the search bar within a platform to find somebody. So if you went and put, Mandy Salley in the search bar, ideally we would think, your account and some other accounts would show up. But a lot of adult workers and sex workers will find, like, unless you know the exact way that it is spelt out, you cannot find them on a platform. They're not discoverable, is the terminology. So that's a form of moderation that we see a lot with not safe for work content. And then also generally just that you post, but no, it's not getting put in front of anybody. So it's being deprioritized. No one is seeing it in their feeds, even if they are doing the, like, I'm looking at the who am I following and I want it in chronological order. It's very hard to get your feed to look that way anymore, right? It's always going to be doing this kind of, like we always say, just like the algorithm, which is a very vague term that gets used in a lot of different ways, but the way that the content you see in your feed and when you see it is a form of prioritization, right? So it's not just how things are taken down, but also how things are put up.
Exactly. And for folks, one of the reasons that Woodhull sort of waded into these social media waters with our advocacy is because one of the ways that sex workers, adult performers, are able to market themselves is through social media, right? And if your content is consistently being pushed to the bottom and not being shown to users, then it has a direct impact on your income. Um, and in a world where, everything we do really is online and the way we find out about things is online, social media has sort of become this necessary tool. I think in any business's toolbox, right? And the social media platforms that were more friendly to sexual content about sexuality were really, really important. And we're seeing that change really drastically. Twitter is just, I don't really know where to start with Twitter, but, that used to be a really great place to build community and market. And it's, I would just say not anymore.
Yeah, well, it's, you make a very good point that for a lot of people, but especially for sex workers, tech policy, like social media policy, really winds up being like labor policy in some ways, right? Like it has a really direct, if the place that you are, your primary means of advertising your business is under the rule of these, social media terms of service, that is a direct impact on your labor conditions, but we never think of, either credit card policy with the MasterCard thing or social media policy with this as labor policy. And I think if we frame it that way a little bit more, that helps understand the impact, because usually with any of these policies, again, banking, social media, other tech policies, things like that, the impact to sex workers is always framed as an unfortunate, unintended collateral damage when, in a lot of cases, it is very much the intended consequence or a known, and if not the primary, a desired collateral damage, right?
Right. So. Absolutely. It's a conversation that requires some conversation, some nuance, some research. And, very often it stops at, well, it's just porn. We don't care about that. Right. Without thinking about like the actual people and lives behind all of that. So I'm getting a little off topic here.
I mean, I think you're right on topic, because one of the impacts we found was that, a lot of people are using Reddit to advertise and direct traffic towards their pay sites, their OnlyFans, their cam sites, whatever. And about half of the respondents did say that they were getting less traffic through Reddit now, that had been a sort of primary vehicle for traffic, and they'd noticed a decrease in traffic through that. And then it was 71% of the people who said, yes, I definitely use my account for advertising towards a paid platform. 71% of those people noticed a drop in their income. So, it's a pretty huge majority seeing an impact on incomes that are often not, people also think someone doing porn is like raking it in, they're making so much money. You see these articles about, the OnlyFans person who's a millionaire in their mid-20s, and like that's a very rare circumstance. Most people who are doing sex work are making, living paycheck to paycheck like everybody else. It's like, it's pretty rough out there right now with cost of living. So any hit to your income is a real detriment to your quality of life and your ability to survive. So it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that we talked a little bit about moderation a second ago, but one of the things I thought was really important about the report was you talked about the difference between Reddit staff moderators and like regular volunteer moderators of the subreddit. I shouldn't say regular, like users who are moderators. And one of the things that you found is that users experience unequal moderation in subreddits and discrimination. And so I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit about what your findings were.
So in terms of the type of moderation they're getting in subreddits?
Right. So just sort of the unequal
Mm.
nature of the moderation.
Yeah, well, I mean, in part, sometimes it is difficult for people to know where the moderation is coming from. So I think that's one of the tricky parts too about Reddit is not knowing what rule has been broken where. And most people felt that they hadn't broken any terms of service. They were well aware of the overall Reddit terms of service, so they don't think that they've broken any of those Reddit admin rules. They know what's going on in the subreddit. But there were cases where, it seemed like with the subreddit moderators, the rules could change sort of, without notice, that they were applied much more unevenly. And that, but in all cases, a lot of the problem was just a lack of communication, right? People not understanding what they had supposedly done wrong, so they don't know how to correct it. Not getting any kind of communications, or the communications that they do get being unclear. So that was an issue that a lot of people raised. And then, yeah, in some of the subreddits that were, designed towards adult content or not safe for work content, seeing disproportionate treatment of particular performers. So again, we have to be somewhat, we're theorizing to some degree what the cause might be, but in some cases we know that there's sort of management that will prioritize certain accounts because they are, taking a percentage of people's earnings. And then, so there's a lot of different things going on there in terms of how the professionalization of OnlyFans and that sort of thing has also influenced this landscape. I don't know if I'm answering your question here, but there's a lot of stuff going on. So it's hard to say that there is this definitive issue. And that's part of the thing with Reddit as well. And we try to lay this out in the introduction, is there was no clear singular policy that Reddit passed where, we knew that there would be this particular outcome. There have been a handful of different things over the last 4 years or so, like the Imgur,
whatever they're called.
Yeah, like that, that change, which wasn't a Reddit change, but impacted Reddit, and then a few other ways that Reddit has made little changes that together seem to make the site a little more hostile to not safe for work, sort of not allowing ads on not safe for work threads, removing adult content from the all, like the main feed. Of course, the more recent API, removing adult content from the API, which Ashley really had to explain what an API was to me. But, these ways that people use the protocol to do things with it. So there's been a bunch of little changes over time that don't seem at all orchestrated, but I think are indicative of just the broader landscape of increasing discrimination of anything sex related on the internet. And so we're seeing it kind of crop up in little places like this. And it seems like to some degree that is getting passed down into how subreddits are being moderated.
Yeah. There's the internet is increasingly hostile towards anything sexual, which I think is only being made worse by legislation, which is, not our topic today, but certainly something we talk a lot about at Woodhull.
Mm-hmm.
And if folks are interested in learning more about that, we talk a lot about that in our censorship series, which is on YouTube, and a lot of our blog posts and all that good stuff. But I want to shift gears a little bit, because you also have some recommendations for Reddit. That you included in the report, which I think would be helpful to talk about. So yeah, flip the page.
Won't have them memorized.
Tell us a little bit about what some of those recommendations are.
Yeah, so the first one, basically establishing a stakeholder advisory council for different marginalized groups on the platform. And in this case, we're focusing on sex workers or other people doing not safe for work content. So a lot of times it does seem with Reddit they've stated a couple of times that they have no intention of fully removing not safe for work content from the platform, that they believe it's important. And I think that, I think that that's true. It seems like they do believe in the value of not safe for work content, but without having constant communication with users on the site to know what the actual experience is, it seems that they may not be aware or understand how to ensure that commitment can hold true. So having an advisory council of some kind, or some sort of focus group, whatever, of sex worker users, just to know what's going on and to try and come up with solutions that actually make sense for the people who are using the site. So that was the first one. A big issue has been advertising. So just securing an advertising partner that is adult friendly, right? This is a big issue we see with banking. This is a big issue with anything monetary, right? Is that there's a lot of them that just don't want to touch adult content, and so the platforms will just remove ads from not safe for work, because people don't want their advertising next to something that's going to be bad for their image or branding, right?
Their brand or whatever.
Yeah, right. So there are, though, adult-friendly advertising networks. So just partnering with, securing one of those to monetize not safe for work subreddits properly, right? Or allowing adult creators to advertise on related subreddits that are marked as not safe for work, right? So bring in revenue, minimize spam. It's a win-win. Then just more kind of generally thinking about content moderation in a sort of human rights framework, including the right to see and post sexual content. So, a lot of people have written, there's that excellent book, not safe for NSFW. I'm not going to remember all the authors right now, but Susanna Passone and colleagues, that, this assumption that sexual content is just sort of inherently dangerous, which permeates the terms of service of all social media platforms. So kind of reorienting mentally, ensuring that the right to sexual content be considered as part of moderation, so that, a consent-based framework, essentially, that you can consent to see things and you can consent to not see things, and just giving people those options. Although a lot of what Reddit has done in the recent years was changing those defaults, right? Where more and more the default settings on most of these platforms are that you don't see adult content. And unless you know the intricate way to go through the back end, wouldn't even know that adult content's being blocked for you. So a little more transparency around those options and making it easier for people to opt in to adult content if they want it. And so for all of those conversations, our kind of last point here is just to partner with, in the original report, we had adult-friendly social media sites like Twitter, because at the time, Twitter, technically, Twitter is still more adult-friendly than all of the other ones, right? Like, people are still on there, but it's how optimistic I am about that particular partnership at this point. I would maybe reconsider, but being in conversation with groups like Woodhull, groups like Free Speech Coalition, groups like EFF, ACLU, and other organizations that are thinking through how to bridge these issues of sex worker rights while still, enabling people to make choices about the content they see, so that they can kind of prioritize a better system for users to control what they see.
Yeah, and I think, the part of the problem with Twitter is the reason a lot of adult performers, sex workers are still there is because there's nowhere else to be.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not necessarily wanting to be there, but it's like, what's the alternative, right?
Yeah. And the blue check discourse, can we just take a moment? I know that we're not talking about Twitter, but when they introduced the blue check mark that you pay for, and everyone was ripping on it and saying, I'm going to block all of the accounts that have blue check marks because these are all just Elon simps or what, a lot of sex workers were using the blue check already as a way to try and avoid that constant deprioritization and shadow banning.
Mm-hmm.
And so these mass campaigns to block everybody that had a blue check were really harmful to sex workers. And a lot of people, Ashley was one person that posted about this a lot, right? That you have to think through, why and how sex workers are the most adept at strategically using social media and digital tools in general. And there's a reason that sex workers are the target group for a lot of moderation, is because they're very good at getting around things. So they're a good, it's like how you get a hacker to test your security, right? Mm-hmm. So but yeah, I'll just say that there was that a lot of sex workers are on Twitter as a last resort. I know there was a talk about everyone was moving to Blue Sky for a minute. I don't know if that's still happening, but it's all the people that said, well, that's it, we're leaving and we're gonna boycott Twitter. That's not a luxury for a lot of people.
Right.
To think about what happens when you abandon a site that has been the only remotely safe refuge for sexual content. Or one of them.
Yeah.
The two.
Yeah. It's really tough. And, the other thing is, like, Twitter was such a powerful tool for activists and organizers and journalists. And, like, I think for your everyday regular social media user, it's like, Twitter, okay, it's another platform. We're not going to use it. It's going to go the way of, like, I don't know if you remember Vine, which was like the little 7-second videos. It's like, oh, nobody uses it anymore. We're just like moving on or whatever. But it was a tool, right? It was a really helpful tool. And I think its changes have really created a big void, broader than just the sex work community. And it's really quite unfortunate. And I don't think there's been a platform that has really been able to fill that. I know there's Blue Sky, there's Spoutable, there was a lot of talk about Mastodon for a while, but it's not quite the same. And, there's issues with everything, right? But what I hope does not happen is I would hate for, I'll just bring it back to Reddit because that's what we're really here to talk about today. I don't want Reddit to go the way of like Tumblr.
Yeah.
Right. Where you've just removed all sexual content and it's this, very whatever it is. Right.
Well, even,
platform.
like you say, for the political organizing, one thing that we had asked about was if being not marked as not safe for work had impacted the other ways you use the site. Because most people are also not doing safe for work stuff on there. And it was, 57% who said that being marked not safe for work had impacted their ability to do any kind of political organizing on the site. That their account is getting banned for a not safe for work thing they did here, and they're losing access to all of their other safe for work communities and that any kind of organizing. We know from that excellent report that Hacking Hustling did after Fosta Sesta first came out, that sex workers who were engaged in any kind of political organizing were much more likely to be shadow banned. It was their shadow banning report, not their FOSTA report. A couple of different ones, but anyway, great stuff. Of course, like sex workers of color, sex workers who are trans, and then also, the demographics that are almost always disproportionately targeted in moderation, but political organizing always added another layer of scrutiny.
Yeah, we heard similar things. We did our censorship program last month was about art censorship, and because a lot of artists are facing similar issues on. We were talking mostly about Meta's platforms, but I'm sure it's probably similar across platforms. And one of the things they talked about is how there are a lot of artists who would create multiple accounts, right? And like maybe one of their accounts had artwork that maybe contained nudity or something like that, but the other accounts didn't. And if the account with nudity, just like you said, was shadow banned, it started to affect all of the accounts. So just, there's some interesting things happening sort of behind the scenes at these platforms, right?
Even when people are doing their very best to absolutely conform to these terms of service, such that you're having completely separate accounts to engage in different things, right? And it's this constant siloing of sexuality.
Hmm.
And once you've siloed it, it's so much easier to just eliminate, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
and the
it's everything. It's just
yeah, and I think it's unfortunate. I mean, it's more than unfortunate, but that's the word that's coming to my brain right now. That sex workers and folks in the adult industry, folks working in porn, always are sort of the first to sound the alarm when this kind of like censorship, moderation, nonsense starts happening. And we've started to hear over the past, I'll say, like, year to 18 months,
mhm,
it's becoming increasingly a problem for sex educators, sex
mhm,
therapists, folks talking just about like body stuff that's not explicit. So
yeah,
it's the censorship and all of that is starting to cast a much broader net. And so I think, even if you're somebody who maybe doesn't care about the plight of sex workers,
right.
right? Or about porn, it's like it's going to come for what you do care about
Yeah.
soon enough, right?
And not even
Um,
just sex things, right?
right.
Olivia Snow's written about this stuff a lot too, right? That the same tools that are being used by anti-trafficking, quote unquote, organizations to do like algorithmic analysis of banking to see who's a high risk, like that's being used for all kinds of things, right? The same AI tools that are being used to scan, or like facial recognition that's being used to block sex workers at borders, will be used for every person that is doing any kind of political dissidence. It's and more things are going to be political dissidence, right? So it's, even if it's not about other sex things, um,
Hmm.
it's anything, anything that either capital or the state at some point wants to censor, or identify. All of these tools are being honed on sex workers because they know
Yep.
no one will care. Also, they know that both they're a great test group in terms of being technically savvy
Yep.
and easily scapegoatable. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I think here in the US, the new Speaker of the House as of a few weeks ago is a um has awful beliefs about LGBTQ people, about reproductive rights and abortion access, and um all of these beliefs I think are going to be baked into legislation very soon, and into moderation practices and all this sort of stuff. So I think the point is we all need to wake up to what's happening.
Mhm.
We have given these platforms a lot of power, right? Because we use them. They're really effective, great tools. But now it's time to start calling them to task along with our legislators and everybody else. So I have really enjoyed our discussion today. We're getting towards that like 40-45 minute mark. And so before I close, is I sort of very loosely followed our outline today, but I think we hit our main points. But is there anything we didn't talk about that you want to share about the report, or recommendations, or any sort of like final words?
No, I mean, I think what you ended on is really my main point, is that we're trying to document these different areas and impacts on different platforms at different moments, because we see this as part of a greater network of concern, right? And so even if someone doesn't care about Reddit per se, or doesn't care about porn per se, why the value of documenting this stuff and trying to pay attention to it is so that we, I guess, can try to see what's coming and think through how we're going to combat that. So, people being connected with Woodhull, people being connected with the handful of other organizations that care about this stuff, because there's not very many of you. So thank you for the work you do. Being connected with those organizations. And I think we do need to all start thinking about making sure that we have ways to organize with one another that aren't platform dependent, right? Both like very simply, are you on the email list? Are you on other ways of receiving information about campaigns and communications that aren't dependent on the algorithms of the platforms that you're on? Making sure that you're connected in those ways, and making sure that we have real, not that connections on platforms aren't real, but like alternative methods to be in touch with the people that we share political goals with, so that if and when the rug is pulled out from us with a given platform, we're not completely floundering, like we forget how to talk to people in face-to-face. A lot of my early, I wouldn't say activism, but my early, making stuff as a young person was doing zines, like old, photocopy. I am an elder millennial, so I definitely grew up without the internet. But just the value of other kinds of connection and communication with people, because while of course we want to preserve and somehow find a way to maintain these tools that have been so effective, we're not going to be able to rely on them as the platform under which we organize to protect them, I think. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely important to connect with people offline, and use different ways to communicate with one another and organize. Because the other thing is, everything you put on these platforms, once it's on the platform, it's theirs, right? It's not, you don't really own it anymore, in a certain sense. And
now
on
it's
that
all
happy
being
note,
used for training AI as well now, or something. Like, it's just, it's trash.
yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
It's a very like love-hate relationship with a lot of the stuff, right? As we have a conversation on a social media platform.
Right. Yeah.
The
hypocrisy.
it's not lost
Participate in
on me though.
society.
Right. I love when we do a lot of Instagram lives, and I love getting on Instagram and talking about sex work and talking about porn.
Right.
Because I'm like, yeah, you don't like us, but here I am using this thing you developed to talk about what I feel like, and I'm just waiting for the day that, Woodhull gets booted off something, because I'm sure it's happening. But listen, we're gonna get as much from these platforms for as long as we can. So with that being said, thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your wisdom. And also to Ashley, who is not with us, thank you for her labor in putting together this report. I am going to I'm going to put a link to the report in the comments after this is posted on LinkedIn, so folks can read the whole thing. If you are interested in learning more about this topic, actually coming up this Thursday, we have our next censorship series program, which is called The Thin Line Between Obscenity and Censorship, which we're kind of really going to dig into these issues, like what is obscenity and why do we get to use it to censor people and censor sexual expression. That's coming up this Thursday. And you can register via Eventbrite. It's free. ASL will be provided. And also really exciting this week, our Spokes Hub graduation is happening on Wednesday. Spokes Hub is our program that trains folks who are formerly or currently involved in the sex trade to be advocates and share their stories. And so we would love if you would attend their virtual graduation this Wednesday and hear their stories. This will be the third one we've done, and it's incredibly powerful and moving. So if you feel like you need a little bit of inspiration, you should join us on Wednesday, and we're also going to drop that link in the chat. So with that being said, thank you again for being here. Thank you, Kaylee, for always showing up to whatever conversation we are planning to have and being a fabulous interpreter. And folks, if you really enjoyed this conversation, please head over to woodhullfoundation.org/donate, so that we can continue to do more programming like this for you. And with that being said, I hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. And we'll be back hopefully on LinkedIn Live soon.
Thanks.